Hi, I'm Chandler McLaren, and today I will be reviewing A Quiet Revolution, The Veil's Resurgence from the Middle East to America by Leila Ahmed. And so in this novel, she is investigating how the veil went from being a rare occurrence in her childhood in Egypt to it becoming a common practice again. Ahmed starts off with an introduction that points the reader to believe she has negative feelings associated with the veil. She states, "So for me, the sight of women in hijab, now in America, in styles directly reminiscent of the hijabs of the Muslim Brotherhood, was an arresting and frankly, given my memories of the Brotherhood, a disturbing sight." Her memories centered around attacks that she remembered from her childhood, as well as the assassination of the Egyptian Prime Minister Nakarshi Pasha, who was a friend of her father's. So the novel is, after the introduction, is divided into two parts. The first part is 8 chapters long, and it focuses on the emergence and migration of the veil. And then the second part of the novel is 3 chapters long, and it focuses on events that occurred after 9/11. The first chapter is titled Unveiling, and it focuses on the influence that Western Europe had on Egypt, particularly Britain, because at that time, Britain viewed Egypt as a colony. And so the Europeans' influence caused Egyptians to start adapting more Western fashions, even though they weren't suited for Egypt's climate. And one of these was that the veil started to earn a negative connotation. The views about the veil as an emblem of Islam's inferiority and its treatment of women became prevalent in the late 19th century, most particularly in France and Britain, as both nations were extending and deepening their domain over Muslim lands. And this was interesting that France and Britain had these views since head coverings had existed in Judaism and Christianity. But Egyptians didn't believe that unveiling only focused on the literal meaning of the word, but that it would become ever more clearly the emblem of an era of new hopes and desires. Ahmed makes the argument that although women started to unveil themselves, it didn't mean they were rejecting Islam. She writes, "There was no suggestion whatsoever in that era that women's unveiling signified their rejection of Islam or their secularism. However, eventually some countries thought that the veil should be completely banned. For example, in the 1930s, the Shah of Iran banned the veil and police were required to remove it from women who didn't comply." And then the second chapter focuses on how the history of the veil reemerging in Egypt has been changed over the decades. For Ahmed's generation, as well as her mother's, they grew up when most women would never wear a veil. However, Ahmed states that during the mid-70s it began to reappear. She writes, "Young girls were soon growing up unaware that there had not been a time when Muslim women, devout, mainstream Muslim women, and not merely secular women, had not worn hijab." And this ties into the third and fourth chapter, which focus on how the veil began to reemerge and the new meaning it took on. Ahmed mentions another author during the time period that she was growing up that believed that societies like Egypt were experiencing another period of Jahiliyyah, and Jahiliyyah means ignorance. And this was interesting because the time period before Muhammad became the prophet is also referred to as Jahiliyyah. So this leads into the second part of the novel, which focuses on Islam in America after 9/11. And Ahmed starts the chapter off by saying that before 9/11, when she had begun researching the subject of the veil's reemergence, that it was very difficult to find any information. She had to look real hard in libraries and read obscure articles. But after 9/11 happened, she could learn of the latest debates of women in Islam simply from watching the news. So she decided to focus on wondering why women had chosen to wear the hijab, and she interviewed women that also decided to wear the hijab after 9/11 happened. And one woman said, "It made me self-aware as far as when I'm in public, I am representing Islam and that I need to show people what Islam really is. And I tied this with a peer-reviewed journal article I had read called Being True to Ourselves Within the Context of Islam, Practical Considerations and Hijab Practices Among Muslim American Women. And the focus of the interviews was to see what the 6 women viewed as their definition of modesty, why they wore the hijab or any other sort of veiling, as well as what other parts of Islam they practiced. For example, one of the interviewees wears a kimar, and her main focus every day was that she wants her style to meet both religious and secular demands, allowing Muslim women to remain modest while tackling the mundane tasks of daily life. And this was interesting because it led the authors to debate about the fact that this particular interviewee's style tended to include multiple embellishments, which could be seen as attention-seeking and not modest. This led and connected with another interview they conducted of a woman who wore the veil, but she was critical if they wore a different form of it than her. For example, she thought the interviewee said that she reasoned that women who covered their face were religious extremists. And so this could be connected with Ahmed's comment of women who would wear or not wear the hijab as being seen different, but they were still practicing the religion. And it was also another interviewee that happened in this article was that they mentioned that they did not start wearing the hijab until they were older. During her childhood, she grew up in a very secular family and they hadn't worn the hijab. But eventually, after she moved to Virginia and she had seen a few other women wearing it, she also decided to. And so, but she does mention that when she went to go and visit her family, she wouldn't wear the hijab, showing that she does have a choice whether or not she wants to wear it. And another article that I found was Women Are Believers in Their Own Right, One Muslim Women's Challenge to Dominant Discourses Shaping Gender Relations in Islam. And it focused on how women were developing their own groups to discuss their religion. And one example was the creation of Islamic email news groups that only women were a part of. So it allowed them to discuss their views without having men intercede. And so through this book and the 2 articles, I thought that it showed how women practicing Islam have adapted over multiple decades to changes that have occurred around them.